You never think it will happen to you. Sure, you hear the stories, right? Tales of men discovering that their wives are cheating with the neighbor or some coworker. But those are just other people's problems, not yours. At least, that's what I kept telling myself, until reality smacked me in the face. It all began subtly, as it often does. Jasmine had been mentioning Tyler a lot lately. Tyler helped fix the mower today. Or, Tyler trimmed the hedges while you were at work. Just little comments. Initially, I thought he was simply being a good neighbor, doing what any decent person would do. After all, the guy lost his wife a few years back, and we'd always been friendly enough. But as her mentions became more frequent, the way Jasmine said his name started to unsettle me. One night, I was at the dinner table with our 8-year-old son, Lucas. Jasmine was in the kitchen, humming a tune while she cooked. Out of the blue, Lucas piped up, "Uncle Tyler and Mom have fun when you're not here." That statement hit me like a punch to the gut. I managed to keep a calm expression for Lucas's sake, but inside, everything twisted. My heart raced as I forced a smile. "What kind of fun, buddy?" I asked, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't on the verge of losing it. "Like games and stuff," Lucas replied, shoving a forkful of spaghetti into his mouth. "They laugh a lot." It should have seemed innocent enough. I mean, laughing isn't a crime. But the way my son delivered it so matter-of-factly gnawed at me. An unsettling feeling constricted around my chest like a vice grip. It's amusing how quickly your mind changes when you start to suspect something is off. Every little detail suddenly feels loaded with significance. I noticed how Jasmine had begun dressing differently. Putting on makeup just to be at home, or wearing outfits that revealed more skin than she usually did. Those looks used to be reserved for date nights. Now, she donned them on random Tuesday afternoons, even while I was at work all day. And Tyler's visits? They had transformed from casual drop-ins to something else entirely. One Saturday, I decided to take the day off, and Tyler showed up uninvited. He wore this awkward expression, almost as if he hadn't expected to find me there. As for Jasmine, she greeted him with that too-wide smile, the one she always wore when she was trying to conceal something. "Hey, Cal," Tyler said, rubbing the back of his neck like a guilty teenager. "Didn't know you'd be home." "Yeah, I bet you didn't," I muttered, my gaze shifting between him and Jasmine. Her cheeks flushed, but she quickly waved it off as if it were nothing. In hindsight, I should have confronted her right then, asked why our neighbor was showing up at our house when I wasn't supposed to be around. But I didn't. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe I was misinterpreting things. Or maybe I just didn't want to face what was clearly happening. Yet, it wasn't just Tyler's unexpected visits that unsettled me. It was how Jasmine began acting when I was around. She'd place her phone face down on the table every time I entered the room. She had never been that secretive about her phone before. When I'd ask her what she was texting about, she'd snap back, "Nothing you need to worry about." That defensiveness was new, like she was hiding a dark secret. Late at night, I'd lie awake next to her, staring at the ceiling while my mind raced through 100 worst-case scenarios. Every time I considered asking her outright, I hesitated. I wasn't ready to hear the answer, whatever it might be. I still wanted to believe everything was fine, that Tyler was just a neighbor and Jasmine was simply bored from being home too much. But that nagging feeling in my gut never faded. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch. A quiet voice insisting that something was off. One night, after tucking Lucas into bed, I found myself on the couch with a beer in hand, scrolling through my phone to distract myself from my racing thoughts. Jasmine was in the kitchen, laughing softly as she texted someone. The sound grated on my nerves. "Who's so funny?" I asked, glancing up from my phone. Her smile disappeared. "Just Tessa from book club," she replied quickly, slipping her phone into her pocket. I nodded slowly, my jaw tightening. Right, Tessa. It wasn't Tessa. I knew it and she knew that I knew. But neither of us said anything further. Instead, she vanished upstairs, and I sat there nursing my beer, feeling like a fool. The hardest part wasn't the suspicion itself. It was the doubt. It made me second-guess everything. Every conversation, every look, every laugh. I hated it. I despised that I was beginning to question my own wife, the woman with whom I had built a life. Yet, I couldn't help but notice things, like how she smiled more when Tyler was around or how her eyes sparkled when his name came up in conversation. I saw every touch between them, every glance that lingered just a moment too long. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid, that I was imagining things. But deep down, I understood better. The night Lucas innocently commented about his mom having fun with Tyler, that wasn't just child's play. That was a glaring red flag, plain and simple. I just wasn't ready to admit it. Not out loud, not even to myself. But I knew the truth was looming on the horizon, whether I wanted to confront it or not. And once I did, there would be no turning back. Friday afternoon rolled around. I wasn't supposed to be home that early, but work had been light, and I thought I'd surprise Jasmine. Maybe take her and Lucas out for dinner, do something nice for a change. Lately, things between us had felt off. The tension hung thick between us, unspoken but always present. I wanted to shake it off, convince myself that I was just being overly sensitive. As I pulled into the driveway, my heart sank when I spotted Tyler's truck parked outside. A wave of unease washed over me. Sure, he often dropped by, but this felt different, like an ominous sign. My gut twisted in protest, but I tried to dismiss it. Maybe he was just being a good neighbor again, fixing another damn lawnmower. But as I approached the front door, what I saw stopped me in my tracks. There was Tyler, stepping out of my house with his shirt half unbuttoned, looking uncharacteristically flustered. He froze for a moment, eyes wide, as if caught red-handed. Jasmine stood behind him in the doorway, her laughter ringing out a little too loud and a little too forced, like she was trying to mask something that had just occurred. Every instinct in me screamed that something was terribly wrong. "Hey, Cal," Tyler managed, forcing a tight smile while fumbling to button up his shirt. "Just helping Jasmine with a few things." "Sure you were," I replied, my voice flat as I glared at him. My eyes flicked between him and Jasmine, who now wore a sheepish expression, her face flushed. Jasmine jumped in quickly, her tone almost desperate. "He was just fixing the sink, Caleb. You know how it's been leaking." The cheerfulness in her voice sounded forced, her posture tense, as if she was bracing herself for a confrontation. I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but all I could do was stand there, my jaw clenched, watching Tyler retreat to his truck. Jasmine remained in the doorway, arms crossed tightly over her chest, pretending everything was fine, but I could see the cracks in her facade. That night, the atmosphere felt heavier than ever. Jasmine barely said a word during dinner, her attention glued to her phone, as if the screen held the secrets of the universe. Each time her phone lit up with a message, a secretive smile crept onto her lips, only to vanish as she hid it from me. My stomach twisted with anxiety. I tried to convince myself that I wouldn't snoop, that I wasn't the kind of guy who rummages through his wife's phone looking for answers. But that persistent gnawing sensation in my chest wouldn't relent. I had to know. Later, I found her dozing on the couch, her phone still clutched in her hand. She snored softly, breathing steadily, completely unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. This was my chance. My heart raced as I hesitated, then slowly slid the phone from her grasp. Unlocking it was a breeze. Her password was still Lucas's birthday. What I discovered in that messaging app hit me like a sledgehammer. There it was, Tyler's name at the top of her messages, accompanied by a string of texts that froze my blood. Flirtatious banter, plans for secret meetings, and the photos. Oh, the photos. They weren't just playful selfies. They were explicit. Images I couldn't believe she would share with anyone but me. My stomach churned as I scrolled through the messages, each one worse than the last. "Had a blast today. Can't wait for round 2. Miss your kisses from last time. Maybe next time we skip the wine and go straight to dessert." I had to stop reading, or I was going to be sick right there. My throat tightened as the reality set in. This wasn't paranoia or imagination. This was my new reality. Jasmine wasn't just having a fling behind my back. She was in love with him. I sat there, paralyzed, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. But I refused to let this go unanswered. If she thought she could betray me like this, she had another thing coming. I began taking screenshots of everything. Every text, every photo, every filthy little emoji. I logged the dates and times of their rendezvous, documenting it meticulously like evidence in a court case. I didn't know exactly what I planned to do with it all, but gathering this evidence made me feel a bit more in control, like I wasn't completely powerless in the face of her treachery. The following day, I reached out to my old friend Simon Cole. Simon is the type of guy who doesn't pull any punches. A contractor, divorced, and known for his brutal honesty, he was the perfect person to confide in. We met up at a bar not far from my place, and after a couple of drinks, I let it all spill out. "She's sleeping with the neighbor?" Simon said, disbelief flooding his voice.
Jesus, Cal.
"That's brutal." "Yeah," I muttered, swirling the beer in my glass. "I saw the messages. They've been sneaking around for who knows how long." Simon shook his head, leaning back in his chair as if trying to process the news. "Man, file for divorce. Forget her. Don't waste another minute on someone who doesn't appreciate you." I knew he was right. Divorce was the rational next step. But that wasn't enough. A clean break wouldn't satisfy me. I needed more than just a piece of paper confirming our end. I wanted her to understand the pain she caused. "I'm not just walking away," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "She's not getting off that easy." Simon gave me a knowing look, then nodded slowly. "So, revenge is on the table, huh?" Something like that. I didn't have a concrete plan yet, but one thing was crystal clear. I wasn't going to roll over and let her win. If Jasmine thought she could mess with me without consequences, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. When I returned home that night, she was already asleep, curled up on her side of the bed as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't shattered our lives with her reckless choices. I stared at her for a long moment, contemplating how everything had spiraled so far out of control, how the woman I had loved, the one I had built my life with, had morphed into a stranger. But it didn't matter anymore. Any love I had for her was buried beneath layers of anger and betrayal. If she thought I was going to take this lying down, she was in for a rude awakening. This was far from over. Not even close. At first, I wasn't actively seeking revenge against Jasmine. That wasn't my plan. But everything changed when I met Maya Jenkins. It felt like fate had presented me with an opportunity, one I was not about to pass up. It all happened by chance. I had just parked my car in the driveway when I noticed her struggling with a hefty box, balancing it against her hip while fumbling for her house keys. She was new to the neighborhood, having moved in a couple of weeks prior, and we hadn't exchanged much beyond polite hellos. She looked frustrated, beads of sweat making her dark hair cling to her forehead. "Need a hand?" I called out, walking over. She glanced up, and her expression transformed from irritation to relief. "Oh, thank God. You'd think I was moving bricks with how heavy this thing is." I took the box from her, surprised at how light it felt. "Got bricks in here?" I teased, managing a grin for the first time in what felt like ages. Her laughter, a genuine, carefree sound, washed over me like a refreshing breeze. "Nope, just camera equipment. Photographer stuff. Welcome to my glamorous life." That was the beginning of everything. Simple and innocent. But Maya had this effortless, vibrant energy that made her hard to forget. She was the complete opposite of Jasmine, whose smiles felt forced and whose words were always laced with tension. As I helped Maya carry the box inside, I noticed how natural our conversation flowed. There were no awkward silences, no hidden agendas. Just two people chatting like old friends. "By the way," she said, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand, "I'm Maya. You must be Caleb, right?" "Yeah," I replied, nodding. "Nice to finally meet you." She shot me a grin that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Thanks for the help, Caleb. I owe you one." A few days later, she knocked on my door, asking if I could assist her in setting up her Wi-Fi. "Tech stuff isn't my strong suit," she admitted, giving me a sheepish smile. Couldn't say no. Once inside her home, it felt different. Maya's place radiated warmth and comfort, a stark contrast to the cold, tense atmosphere that had taken over my own house. While I tinkered with the router, she made us coffee and plopped down on the couch beside me, tucking her legs beneath her. "You're a lifesaver," she said, handing me a steaming mug. "I've been wrestling with this stupid thing all morning." I shrugged. "No big deal. Just needed to reset a few settings." As we sat there sipping coffee, I felt a sense of relaxation wash over me for the first time in weeks. Maya was easy to talk to, with a playful spirit that was impossible to ignore. "So," she said with a mischievous smile, "what's your story, Caleb? You married? Kids?" "Yeah," I replied, my throat tightening slightly. "Married. I have a son, Lucas. He's 8. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "What's your wife like?" I hesitated, unsure how to answer. "Complicated," I finally muttered, prompting a soft laugh from Maya. "Aren't we all?" she said, playfully nudging my arm. That little touch, a quick brush of her arm against mine, ignited something inside me. It wasn't much, but it was more warmth than I'd felt from Jasmine in a long time. From that day forward, I sought excuses to see Maya more often. I helped her arrange furniture, hung pictures on her walls, and even fixed a leaky faucet. Each time we worked side by side, our hands would brush, sometimes accidentally, but maybe not. There was an undeniable energy between us, something unspoken yet profoundly real. It wasn't just flirting, though that was definitely a part of it. It was the way she looked at me, as if she truly saw me, not as an afterthought or a burden, but as a whole person. Meanwhile, things with Jasmine continued to deteriorate. She picked up on my changing demeanor almost immediately, how I started coming home later without explanation, how I seemed increasingly disinterested in our half-hearted conversations. One night, she cornered me in the kitchen, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "You've been out late a lot lately," she accused, her voice sharp. I leaned against the counter, keeping my expression neutral. "Work's been busy." "Since when?" she shot back. "You're a financial analyst, Caleb, not a surgeon on call." I shrugged, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a detailed explanation. "Stuff comes up." Her jaw clenched, frustration simmering just below the surface. "You think I don't notice when you lie to me?" she hissed. "I'm not an idiot, Caleb." I didn't flinch. "Funny. That's exactly what I was about to say to you." That moment of silence was telling, at least for the time being. But I could see the cracks beginning to form. She wasn't foolish. She knew something was amiss, and it was driving her nuts. And honestly, I relished it. Every time I spent time with Maya, whether we were assembling IKEA furniture or chatting over coffee, it felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that Jasmine had chipped away over the years. Knowing that my happiness was driving Jasmine crazy, that was just the cherry on top. Of course, I wasn't naive enough to think Maya was some kind of angel. She was perceptive. She picked up on the simmering anger beneath my surface almost immediately. "You've got a lot on your mind," she said one evening as we sat on her porch, sipping beers. "I can tell." "Yeah," I confessed, not bothering to sugarcoat my feelings. She tilted her head, her gaze piercing through me. "Have you ever considered just letting it all out? Saying screw it and doing whatever makes you happy for once?" I shot her a sideways glance, a sly grin creeping across my face. "Maybe." But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a maybe. I had a plan brewing in my mind, and I was ready to set it in motion. Jasmine was going to pay for every lie, every secret, and every stolen moment with Tyler. And Maya? She was going to be my accomplice. Jasmine had played her game. Now it was my turn, and I intended to play it to win. It was Thursday night when I finally decided to take action. It was time to stop being cautious and stop tiptoeing around the inevitable. I shot a text to Maya, inviting her to dinner. Almost immediately, she responded, "Thought you'd never ask, winking face." I casually told Jasmine I was going out to meet an old friend for drinks, the lie rolling off my tongue with ease. She didn't put up a fight, though I noticed the tension in her jaw. Let her wonder. Let her stew in uncertainty. When I arrived at the restaurant, Maya was already there, a playful grin lighting up her face. She wore a form-fitting black dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her dark hair cascading down one shoulder. The moment she saw me, her eyes sparkled with that same playful energy I'd come to love. "Wow," she said, rising to greet me. "You clean up nice, Caleb. And you're looking stunning," I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. In that instant, I felt more alive than I had in years. Over a bottle of wine, our conversation flowed effortlessly, each laugh and flirtation igniting the chemistry between us. Maya was bold, her foot brushing against mine beneath the table, and I leaned into the connection, savoring every moment. By the time dessert arrived, I knew exactly how the evening would conclude, and I welcomed it with open arms. We didn't waste any time pretending to say goodnight at her door. As soon as we stepped inside her home, it was as if a switch flipped. The tension that had been building between us exploded, and we abandoned all restraint. Clothes scattered across the floor, hands explored without hesitation, and for the first time in ages, I felt desired. Not second best, but fully wanted. When the night finally came to an end, we lay intertwined, the room still alive with the remnants of our passion. Maya rested her head on my chest, her fingers tracing lazy circles against my skin. "No regrets?" she murmured softly in the darkness. "Not a single one," I whispered, and I meant it wholeheartedly. The following morning, I drove home, Maya's perfume lingering on my clothes, subtle yet distinct, sweet with a hint of spice. It was the kind of scent that clung to you, like a delicious secret. I deliberately didn't shower or change. I wanted Jasmine to notice. As soon as I walked through the door, Jasmine was waiting for me in the kitchen, arms crossed, her eyes narrowing the instant they fell on me. "Where have you been?" she demanded, her voice tight with suspicion. "Out," I replied casually, brushing past her. I could see her nostrils flare as the scent wafted toward her. Her eyes darted to my collar, where a faint smudge of lipstick, Maya's lipstick, stood out against the white fabric. For a brief moment, her expression faltered, just enough for me to see the cracks forming in her facade. But she quickly masked it with a cold, forced smile. "You smell different," she remarked, suspicion dripping from her words. I shrugged nonchalantly, feigning indifference. "Must be the cologne at the bar. Some guys really go overboard." I could feel her simmering beneath the surface, but she didn't push further. Not yet. In the days that followed, I kept meeting Maya. Each time, I left just enough breadcrumbs for Jasmine to discover. An unlocked phone with a flirty message from Maya, a jacket that still held her scent, a playful text left deliberately in view. The first time Jasmine discovered one of the messages, she attempted to keep her cool. She confronted me with a nonchalant facade, pretending like she wasn't dying inside. "Who's Maya?" she asked one evening as I returned late from one of my work meetings. "A friend," I replied with a shrug, avoiding eye contact as I kicked off my shoes. "A friend?" she echoed, her voice rising slightly, eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Yep," I said, keeping it vague, enjoying how my uncertainty gnawed at her. She tried to maintain her composure, but it didn't last long. I knew her too well, knew exactly how to push her buttons. Watching her unravel bit by bit was satisfying. One night, after I'd left my phone charging in the living room, I caught her snooping through it. She didn't notice me lurking in the hallway, observing her as she scrolled through my messages with Maya. The moment she stumbled upon our flirty exchanges, intimate and undeniably clear, her face contorted with a mix of jealousy, anger, and hurt, all boiling just beneath the surface. She slammed the phone down on the counter, her hands shaking. When her eyes met mine, her expression shifted to one of desperation and accusation. "So this is what you've been doing?" she hissed, venom dripping from her words. "Running around with some whore behind my back?" I crossed my arms, meeting her glare with a calm, collected demeanor. "Funny," I said coolly. "I was going to ask you the same thing about Tyler." That statement silenced her. For a brief moment, Jasmine's face went pale, and though her mouth opened to argue, no words came out. Deep down, she realized she had no right to be angry, not after everything she'd done. But that didn't stop her from trying. "This is different," she stammered, her voice quivering. "What you're doing, it's even," I interjected sharply. "Yeah, that's exactly what it is." Jasmine stood there, visibly stunned, her fists clenching at her sides. "You're disgusting," she spat, venom dripping from her words. I met her gaze with a calm smile. "Takes one to know one." After that moment, our relationship plummeted to new depths. Every conversation turned into a battlefield, and every interaction was laced with bitterness and contempt. Yet, through it all, I continued to see Maya, savoring every moment of our affair and the twisted satisfaction it provided me. Jasmine attempted to maintain a facade, but I could see her disintegrating. Bit by bit, she was unraveling, powerless to stop the decline. She had played her game and lost, forced to watch as I played mine. Better, colder, and without a shred of remorse. And the best part? I wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. It was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. In games like this, it's never about if you'll get caught. It's about when. That morning, the entire situation erupted right there in our front yard. Maya had stopped by to return a lens she'd borrowed from another photographer. Nothing significant, just an excuse to see me before her next shoot. We stood outside, the morning sun warming our skin as we leaned against my truck, chatting lightly. I should have felt guilty, laughing with her, but instead, I felt liberated. Then Jasmine appeared. The moment she saw us, her face contorted with fury, lips curled, eyes ablaze. For a brief second, I thought she might actually slap me, right there in front of Maya. Instead, she stormed over, fists clenched, her voice trembling with rage. "What the hell is this?" she hissed, her eyes darting between me and Maya. "Morning," I replied, maintaining an unruffled demeanor as if everything were perfectly normal. "Don't morning me, Caleb. Is this what you've been doing? Sneaking around with her?" Jasmine's voice rose, loud enough to attract the attention of a few neighbors across the street. Maya instinctively stepped back, raising her hands as if to indicate she wanted no part in the drama. Smart move. Just then, Tyler jogged over from his yard, wearing that infuriating expression, the one he always had when he thought he was the hero. "Jasmine, maybe you should take a breath," he said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Not your fight, Tyler." I shot back, my tone low and frosty. "This is between me and my wife. And you've never been welcome here." Tyler opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He understood exactly what I meant. He cast Jasmine one last awkward glance before retreating to his side of the yard, leaving her to face me alone. Her body trembled now, but it wasn't just fury. It was something darker, something deeper. "So it's true," she whispered, disbelief coloring her voice. "You're cheating on me." With her. I held my ground, unwavering. I didn't flinch or look away. I stood there, as steady as a rock, and uttered the words I had been waiting to say for weeks. "Now we're even." In an instant, Jasmine's face shattered. All her anger and jealousy melted away, replaced by shock and humiliation. She stood there, staring at me in disbelief, as if she thought she still had some hold over me. She didn't. Not anymore. Her legs buckled slightly, and she sank onto the porch step, burying her face in her hands. I watched as her shoulders trembled with silent sobs. For the first time in a long while, I felt no pity for her. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red and puffy. "Please, Caleb," she whispered, desperation clawing at her voice. "We can fix this. I made a mistake with Tyler. It was foolish. It didn't mean anything. I was lonely, and you were always working." Her voice trailed off, and she searched my face, desperate and broken. "Please, let's start over. We can go to therapy or—" "It's over, Jasmine." The words came out colder than I anticipated, but they felt utterly right. She shook her head, fresh tears spilling from her eyes. "No, it doesn't have to end like this. We can still—"
No. y interrupta firmly.
We can't. I'm done. In that moment, she understood there was no room for negotiation. No more lies, no more excuses. I was finished with her, with the marriage, with everything. The next day, I reached out to a lawyer, Clara Banks. She came highly recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense professional who cut to the chase. During our first meeting, she sat across from me in her sleek office, her hands folded neatly on the desk. "So, Mr. Foster," she began, her tone smooth and efficient, "what outcome are you hoping for in this divorce?" "Clean and fast," I replied. "I don't care about the house. I just want custody of Lucas." Clara nodded, quickly jotting down notes on her legal pad. "I can make that happen." There was no hesitation in her voice. She was unwavering. She knew precisely what she was doing, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt like I finally had someone in my corner. The road ahead wouldn't be smooth. Divorces rarely are. But I was ready to face it, ready to close this chapter of my life and step into a new beginning. When I arrived home that evening, Jasmine was slumped on the couch, her eyes fixed blankly on the TV screen. She didn't even glance up as I walked through the door. "I spoke with a lawyer today," I said, standing firmly in the doorway. Her shoulders drooped, and a shaky breath escaped her lips. "You really mean it, don't you?" "Yeah," I replied softly.
Ido.
From that point on, the fighting ceased. No more shouting matches or desperate pleas. Just a thick silence that enveloped us, heavy and oppressive, like the calm before a storm. In that stillness, something dawned on me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was simply done. Done with the lies, the betrayal, and the games. Done with everything that had once been my marriage. For the first time in what felt like ages, I felt a sense of liberation. I could breathe again, and it felt damn good. The divorce wrapped up faster than I anticipated, but the speed didn't lessen the sting. Clara Banks was efficient and ruthless. She filed papers, scheduled hearings, and within months, it was official. Jasmine and I were finished. She kept the house, just as I had told Clara I didn't care about it. All I wanted was a fresh start, and with the custody of Lucas secured in my favor, I had what mattered most. The day I moved into my new apartment, I was hit with a whirlwind of emotions. Relief was the predominant feeling, but there was also an unsettling emptiness. Ending a marriage, no matter how fractured, leaves a void. To fill that space, I threw myself into my old hobbies, hoping to replace what Jasmine's betrayal had taken from me. I found solace in fishing, waking up before dawn to cast my line into tranquil waters, allowing the serenity to envelop me like a comforting embrace. I started hiking again, immersing myself in nature, pushing my body on rugged trails to feel something, anything, beyond the pain. I even hit the gym, determined to shed the years of bitterness and resentment that had accumulated within me. Maya was still in my life for a while. We kept seeing each other, and it was refreshing, light, uncomplicated, no strings attached. But as time went on, I realized our connection was more of a distraction than anything else. She had been a way to reclaim a sense of self after Jasmine's betrayal, but distractions only provide temporary relief. One morning, as I lay in Maya's bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew it was time to let go. When I finally told Maya we needed to end things, she smiled gently, her eyes filled with understanding. "I was wondering when you'd come to that conclusion," she said, brushing a soft kiss on my cheek. "Take care of yourself, Caleb." And just like that, she was gone, leaving behind nothing but pleasant memories and a clean break. Exactly what I needed. Meanwhile, Jasmine kept reaching out. She called, texted, and even emailed me a few times. At first, I ignored her attempts. But when the messages didn't stop, I finally blocked her number. I had no desire to reopen old wounds. I had spent far too long trapped in the past. It was time to move forward, with or without her. Tyler vanished from the neighborhood shortly after the divorce was finalized. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. I didn't probe for details. Maybe Jasmine had become too much for him, or perhaps he simply wanted to escape the fallout. Either way, it was no longer my concern. She could deal with her own mess. Months later, at a mutual friend's gathering, life surprised me with an unexpected twist. I was standing by the grill, lost in my thoughts, when Sophie Parker approached me. "Hey, you're Caleb, right? Simon mentioned you'd be here." Sophie was refreshingly different. She wasn't flashy or over the top, just kind, thoughtful. There was a warmth in her eyes that caught me off guard, a quiet strength beneath her easy smile. As we began to talk, the hours slipped away unnoticed. She shared her own story of divorce, how painful it had been and how it had transformed her. I found myself recounting my experiences, too, and for the first time it didn't feel like I was digging up old wounds. Speaking with Sophie felt effortless, like discovering a kindred spirit who understood without needing every detail laid bare. After that night, we started seeing each other. It was unhurried, uncomplicated, just two people navigating life together, one day at a time. Gradually, the walls I had erected around my heart began to crumble. For the first time since my marriage ended, I felt a flicker of something real, something that transcended revenge or distraction. Jasmine reached out one final time, but I didn't even flinch. I deleted her voicemail without a second thought, knowing there was nothing she could say to change what had transpired. The past was just that, the past, and I refused to let it haunt me any longer. One morning, I stood by the lake with my fishing rod in hand, watching the sun rise over the water. The world felt serene, as if everything had finally fallen into place. I reflected on Jasmine, on Tyler, and all the anger and bitterness that had once consumed me. Revenge had its sweetness, sure, but it was fleeting, like fireworks that illuminate the night sky for a moment, only to leave you in darkness again. What truly set me free wasn't making Jasmine pay. It was letting go, walking away from the wreckage without looking back. And as I stood there, the burdens of the past finally lifting from my shoulders, I smiled. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely free. And damn, it felt good.